Imagine, you are 12 years old. You're standing on this sweltering playground.
Right. The absolute worst place to be when you're vulnerable.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And you have just been completely, utterly humiliated by a bully, like right in front of everyone.
Yeah, you're just burning with shame.
Burning with it. So what is your immediate instinct? You retreat, you go to a corner of the playground, you find some innocent bees buzzing around this patch of yellow flowers, and you just start viciously crushing them under your sneakers.
Wow.
All while humming the Imperial March from Star Wars. I mean, you literally become the villain.
It's a haunting image, the bullied child instantaneously mutating into the bully.
Exactly. And why? Because when the physical world fails you, when you have zero power in your actual life, you map your trauma onto the only moral framework you possess.
Yeah.
Which, for a kid in the 80s, is pop culture.
You're using a space opera as like an instruction manual for processing pain.
Yes. And that is just one of 100 staggering moments we are about to unpack today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. This is fictional station WKRP, broadcasting live from the rainy, bustling, coffee-scented heart of Seattle, Washington. You are tuning into the show that takes a stack of incredible source material and distills it into the absolute best nuggets of knowledge just for you.
And today we really have something special for you.
We do. Today we are exploring this absolute hidden gem of a book. It's titled exactly this: Life Lessons of a Man-Child, a memoir by R.C. Howard.
And yes, you heard that right. There is a question mark printed right there on the title page.
Which tells you right away, like, this isn't going to be a straightforward chronological diary of someone's life, right?
Not at all. It was this profound, beautifully messy exploration of how the hilarity of 1980s pop culture nostalgia can actually serve as a framework for understanding really heavy stuff.
Yeah, devastating trauma, complex family history, and ultimate faith. It's wild how he balances it all.
It really is. That question mark in the title is doing a lot of heavy lifting,
Right.
because Howard is actively challenging the boundaries of memory itself. Howard frames this entire journey using Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's classic novella, The Little Prince.
Such a good book.
The fundamental premise of The Little Prince is that all grown-ups were once children, but very few of them remember it. Adulthood essentially acts as a kind of amnesia. We are going to trace the exact sequence of this book's 8 main stories for you today. And what you'll find is that this isn't just a nostalgic trip down memory lane.
No, it's definitely not. Our mission today is to pull out the actual life lessons here.
Exactly. Howard is putting forward a very specific, somewhat radical thesis, really, that being a man-child isn't about refusing to grow up.
Right, it's not Peter Pan syndrome.
No, it is an intentional, fiercely protective act of holding on to the inner child to preserve the curiosity and imagination you absolutely need to survive the brutal realities of adulthood.
I want to stop right there because that reframe is so important. Usually when we hear man-child, we think of, someone who refuses to pay taxes and plays video games all day to avoid real responsibility.
Right, the basement dweller stereotype.
Exactly. But Howard is arguing that the adult world is designed to basically grind away our creative spark, and that reclaiming that spark, looking at the world with the unfiltered wonder of a kid, is actually a vital survival mechanism.
It's how we cope. And he distills this survival guide into 4 core life lessons for you. Create, be selfless, be fearless, and believe.
And he doesn't waste any time getting to the first lesson, which is the imperative to create.
But what's fascinating is how he introduces this. He doesn't start with a sweeping origin story about his birth or like his parents' meeting.
No, he starts with a chapter titled exactly as The Fruit.
Yeah.
And it is entirely this exercise in intense, hyper-focused observation.
Right. He takes an incredibly mundane object, an apple sitting in a milky white antique bowl, and he just simply looks at it.
But, he really looks at it. He approaches this apple with the sheer determination of a kid trying to find Waldo.
That's a great way to put it.
He studies the skin of this apple, and suddenly it ceases to be just a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
He notices these tiny white specks scattered across this bold red background, and he describes it as looking like a Martian snow globe.
A Martian snow globe. It's so vivid.
Right. And when he finally bites into it, he describes the sweetmeat as the nectar of the gods. He even rewrites this simple description in the style of Walt Whitman.
Which is just, it's so playful but brilliant.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because okay, imagine you're tuning an old fuzzy television dial. You know how it used to be just static and gray snow?
Yeah, trying to get the antenna just right.
Right. And you twist it just a fraction of an inch, and suddenly the static clears, and this vivid, vibrant, colorful picture emerges from something you were previously just completely ignoring. That is what he's doing here.
That analogy of the television dial gets right to the neurological mechanism at play here. What Howard is demonstrating in the fruit is the neuroplasticity of perception.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, we habituate to our environments, right? The adult brain is incredibly efficient. It sees an apple and immediately categorizes it as food, and then it stops processing visual data to save energy.
You don't need to overthink an apple if you're just going to eat it.
Exactly. But Howard is showing us that creativity fundamentally requires us to slow down and override that adult efficiency. He makes this beautiful point that writers, or artists of any kind, really, are essentially just professional noticers.
Professional noticers. I love that.
Yeah, they spend their energy paying attention to the details everyone else just rushes past.
But that level of imagination isn't just born from deep observation. It also comes from the pure, blissful ignorance of childhood.
Because when you don't know the rules of the adult world, everything is a toy, right?
Yes. Which brings us to his second story, The Mansion, where we see this play out perfectly. Howard moves from the micro-environment of this apple to the macro-environment of his childhood homes.
And he sets the baseline for us by describing their first home, which is this cramped 900-square-foot house.
Right, 900 square feet is tight for a whole family.
Very tight. But the spatial constraints of that 900-square-foot house bred a very specific kind of creativity. When you don't have space, you invent it.
You have to.
He describes the avocado-colored appliances, this massive poltergeist tree out in the yard, and the racetrack shag carpet in the living room that was just the absolute perfect terrain for Hot Wheels and Star Wars trench runs.
Oh man, I have to bring up the bathtub bubble anecdote from that tiny house because it is just the epitome of childhood innocence.
Oh, this part is hilarious.
It is. So Howard and his brothers are exploring the space beneath the bathroom sink, as kids do, and they find this strange contraption. It's this red rubber balloon with a long, flexible nozzle ending in a flute-like piece.
And being little boys, they completely lack the contextual vocabulary to understand what this object actually is.
Exactly. They have absolutely no idea it's a red douchebag. Ignorance is bliss.
So funny.
So what do? They take the nozzle and use it to blow these massive, impressive bubbles in the bathtub.
Which is, I mean, it's hilarious, but it's also a freak example of what we were just talking about with overriding adult categorization.
No.
An adult sees that object and categorizes it with a very specific utility. A child sees it and says, you know, this is a bubble machine.
Precisely. But as the story transitions to the mansion, the family's environment changes dramatically. They move to what Howard perceives as this ginormous two-story house.
Yeah, it's a huge upgrade for them. They suddenly have a dishwasher, central air, and separate bedrooms.
Big stuff for a kid in the 80s.
Massive. But with this expansion of physical space comes an expansion of psychological complexity. The innocence of the bathtub bubble starts to fade into the more complicated dynamics of growing up.
Which naturally leads to new ways to get into trouble. Because it's a two-story house, they finally have a staircase.
And a staircase is a stage if you're a kid.
Totally. And Howard is clearly a bit of a theatrical kid, so he uses this staircase to stage his own daily production of The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he would stomp on the stairs, scream bloody murder, fake a horrific tumble, and then just wait for his parents to come running in a panic, only to be completely unharmed.
Which is a classic attention-seeking behavior when a child feels swallowed up by a new, much larger environment.
Makes sense.
But it backfires spectacularly.
Karma is undefeated, honestly. Because one day, he offers to bring his parents drinks, genuinely loses his footing, and takes a real spectacular fall down the stairs.
Ouch.
Right. And his parents, who have been completely desensitized by his theatrics, don't even check on him. They just yell from the other room to get their drinks.
That is classic 80s parenting right there.
Truly. And he ends up with a real broken wrist.
Oh, man.
But here's where the story pivots. Because upon his return from the emergency room, his parents give him a peace offering, even though he admits he probably didn't deserve it.
Right. They felt a little guilty, maybe.
Probably. They buy him his first computer from Radio Shack. The Tandy Color Computer 2 or the Coco 2?
And the Coco 2 becomes a major catalyst for him. This wasn't just a toy, it was his gateway into the digital frontier.
It really opened up a whole new world.
It did. He describes the green glow of the cursor, making him feel like he was inside the movie Tron. The computer becomes a space where he can exert total control, which is incredibly appealing for a kid trying to find his footing in a chaotic world.
And he uses it in the most brilliantly petty way. He didn't just play games. His brother had given himself the breakdancing name, Blast. So Howard programmed these endless basic loops that just filled the entire screen with the text, Big Al is Blast, Big Al is Blast, scrolling infinitely.
It's essentially the nerdiest digital graffiti tag possible.
Totally.
But on a deeper level, what Howard is doing with the Coco 2 and with the movies and video games of the 1980s is building a creative shield.
A creative shield, yeah.
As he moves deeper into adolescence, he begins to use 1980s pop culture as a moral and emotional vocabulary to explain his worldview.
I found this to be one of the most compelling parts of the book, honestly, because he uses these pop culture touchstones to articulate very adult fears.
Like how?
They utilize escapism, specifically movies.
And Howard doesn't just treat movies as background noise, he treats them as philosophical texts.
Yes, and he introduces this concept with a brilliant, cheeky nod to copyright law. He hides behind cinematic fair use to protect his use of these cultural touchstones. The section titles alone had me laughing out loud.
Oh, they're great.
Disclaimer Wars, The Disclaimer Strikes Back, and Return of the Sith Claimer. He is boldly planting his flag and saying, these artifacts belong to the corporations, but the emotional truth I extracted from them belongs to me.
If we pull back and look at the architecture of his argument, he categorizes 3 iconic films to map out his own psychological coping mechanisms.
He starts by analyzing Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
The ultimate horror of isolation. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Or, as Howard notices in one of the actual typed pages in the film, there's a brilliant typo. An adult boy.
Right. Howard interprets The Shining not just as a ghost story, but as a cautionary tale of pure imbalance. When responsibility, stress, and the sheer terror of providing for a family consume you, and you sever your connection to creativity and playfulness, you unravel.
You become the monster in the Overlook Hotel. For young Howard, escapism was a survival tactic to avoid becoming that monster.
And he contrasts that total dark imbalance with the never-ending story.
The quest to restore balance. He focuses on the antagonist, the nothing. It isn't a monster with teeth, it's a creeping silent force of apathy that slowly swallows imagination.
He equates the nothing to the insidious process of growing up and forgetting your inner child. The hero, Bastian, has to use his voice, his belief, and his active participation to save Fantasia. He can't just be an observer, he has to enter the story.
And that leads to the holy grail of Gen X morality, Star Wars. This represents the achieved state of balance. The light side and the dark side, work and play, fear and hope, they all have to coexist.
But Howard is incredibly honest about how easily that balance can tip. We return to the playground scene we open the show with, from the chapter Turning.
He paints a vivid picture of himself as a chubby, bullied kid wearing a Star Wars shirt, completely isolated. He desperately wants to connect, so he tries to bluff his way into a conversation with the popular kids about Return of the Jedi.
And a bully just eviscerates him, calls him a liar, mocks him in front of the entire playground.
The visceral humiliation of that moment is something anyone who has ever been 12 can relate to.
And this is where the coping mechanism turns toxic. He retreats to the corner with the yellow flowers. Fueled entirely by shame and impotent rage, he starts stomping the bees into the dirt, humming the Imperial March.
The bullied becomes the Empire. He is literally embodying Yoda's foundational warning. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering.
He didn't have the emotional maturity to process his humiliation, so he mapped his real-world pain onto the moral framework of a space opera, and he chose the dark side.
It perfectly illustrates the danger of relying solely on escapism. It can shelter you, but it can also isolate you further, trapping you in a feedback loop of your own darkest impulses.
Exactly.
Well, wait, let me rephrase that. The dark side is seductive because it offers immediate power when you feel powerless. But childhood anger can't sustain you forever.
No, it can't.
He eventually had to cross the threshold into maturity. And the catalyst for that transition, from the child hiding in Fantasia to the man-child facing reality, was his evolving relationship with his father and his growing comprehension of real-world trauma.
The father is the beating heart beneath the floorboards of this entire manuscript.
If you read the author's supplementary notes, you discover that his dad is the literal genesis of this project. Howard is sitting in a doctor's office in July 2024, and his dad just casually nudges him and says, "You should write a book."
That one sentence, that vote of confidence from his father, tipped the scales and set this entire deep dive in motion.
And their bond is beautifully articulated through the shared consumption of 80s media. Howard points specifically to the movie Cloak and Dagger.
Oh man, Cloak and Dagger. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's about this kid, Davy, who is caught up in a real-life espionage plot. To cope with the terror, he relies on an imaginary spy friend named Jack Flack.
But in the climax of the film, Davy has to let go of Jack Flack because he realizes his real father, who he previously dismissed as a boring, absent adult, is actually the brave hero who steps in to save him.
Howard maps this directly onto his own life. He writes that his father didn't wear a trench coat or carry a silenced pistol like a movie spy. He wore the uniform of a United States Marine.
He worked grueling, exhausted hours to put a roof over their heads.
And as Howard matured, the illusion faded. He realized he didn't need imaginary heroes to escape the world. He had a real one sitting in the living room.
And they bonded in that living room through the sacred ritual of couch co-op video games, playing Contra on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Specifically, the notorious waterfall level.
Yes. Anyone who played Contra knows the waterfall level is where friendships went to die. But Howard writes about how when his dad picked up Player 2's controller, the chaos of the household just faded away.
They weren't just a father and a son dealing with the mundane realities of life. They were an elite commando unit.
They were allies, navigating impossible odds, covering each other's backs to clear the dungeon. His dad was his Jack Flack, pixelated on a CRT screen.
This profound well of familial love and deep respect provides the crucial context for what I consider the most emotionally devastating chapter in the book. It's a foray into fiction called Wounded Sparrow.
This chapter is a stunner. We meet a boy named Henry, who is just 12 years old. Henry is pushed to the absolute brink by a terrifying, abusive, and severely alcoholic father. The tension in the house is suffocating.
It sounds awful.
Finally, during a violent outburst in a moment of sheer desperation and self-preservation, 12-year-old Henry throws a grease-filled skillet at his father.
And the kitchen catches fire. And tragically, the resulting inferno kills his father. It is a devastating, horrifying scene. And the trauma of causing his father's death is so profound, so heavy, that amnesia completely erases Henry's conscious memory of the event.
His brain just shuts the door on it to let him survive.
Exactly. The story then fast-forwards 3 years. Henry's now 15. His mother, Ivy, fiercely protects him by hiding the dark truth of what really happened that night. She bears the entire weight of that secret. Meanwhile, because the trauma is locked away, positive, fragmented memories of good fishing trips with his father begin to gently return to Henry's mind. She constructs a protective narrative. She tells Henry a hopeful, heroic lie about his father's final moments. She absorbs the burden of the truth so her son doesn't have to.
In context of Howard's real life, the subtext here is devastating.
Oh.
Howard wrote this fiction as a way to process the agonizing real-life pain of watching his own mother's memories slowly slip away due to dementia.
Exactly. When you are watching a parent lose their memory, you become acutely aware of how fragile the human mind is. You realize that our identities are just the stories we are able to remember.
Wow.
Through Wounded Sparrow, Howard is creating a safe, controlled laboratory to explore the ethics of memory alteration. Sometimes a protective lie is the ultimate act of love.
Fiction becomes the lead-lined suit he wears to handle the radioactive grief of reality. And he continues to use fiction to honor the real people in his life with the very next story, God Tags. If Wounded Sparrow was for his mother, God Tags is a monumental tribute to his father's legacy.
His father's presence is really the bedrock of this entire manuscript.
In fact, Howard made sure the book was proudly published on November 10th, 2025.
Which is the exact date of the United States Marine Corps' 250th birthday.
Yes.
The level of intention there is just incredible. But let's look at the narrative of the fictional story, God Tags itself. It's so moving.
You have this war-torn Marine returning home but utterly burdened by crushing survivor's guilt. He's humping an emotional ruck that he can't take off. On an airplane, he meets a young girl. And in a deeply poignant, quiet scene, he gives this young girl Isabel's cross.
Giving away the cross bridges the massive gap between his survivor's guilt and a profound spiritual surrender. But this raises a massive philosophical question. How does one reconcile the sheer brutality of war, the blood, the loss, the unfairness, with the concept of divine grace? How do those two things exist in the same universe?
Howard uses this story to show that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's not an eraser that wipes away the trauma of the battlefield.
The Marine doesn't suddenly forget the war because he holds a cross.
Faith, as Howard frames it, often requires surrendering the desperate human need to control the uncontrollable. When the Marine physically gives away the cross, it is an act of letting go of his guilt. It's him saying, I cannot carry this alone anymore, and trusting in a grace larger than his own understanding.
That exploration of a soldier's guilt over surviving flows so naturally into the guilt of a broken vow. We move into what is arguably the darkest, most complex emotional territory of the entire deep dive. 2 letters: guilt, infidelity, and grace versus punishment.
Before we reach the narrative of 2 letters, we have to give the transitional piece, an unkindness and a murder. It's full due.
The wordplay here is just breathtaking.
It is. Howard uses the collective nouns for ravens and crows to establish a deeply Gothic heavy mood. And unkindness is the collective noun for ravens. In the text, the unkindness symbolizes the man's infidelity, the cruel, unnatural betrayal of his marriage vows.
Right.
A murder is the collective noun for crows, which symbolizes the tragic death of his mistress, Sarah. Using this ornithological language serves as the perfect, moody transition directly into the heavy atmosphere of 2 letters.
Because 2 letters is a story entirely defined by consequence. It is a heavy, dark, Gothic romance. The central man in this narrative remains completely unnamed throughout the story, which universalizes his guilt.
And his guilt is staggering. We learn that this man had a mistress named Sarah. One morning, paranoid that their affair was going to be discovered at work, he selfishly sent her away. By sending her home, she walked right into the hands of a violent ex-boyfriend who murdered her.
It's so tragic.
The man is suffering from perpetrator's guilt. He didn't pull the trigger, but his selfishness set the gears in motion. We find him agonizing at her grave at Meadow Creek, and he carves the letters YF into her tombstone.
The psychology of those 2 letters, YF, is brilliant. It's a form of apophenia, the human brain trying to find meaning in random patterns, especially when clouded by grief.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In his mind, YF means your friend, yours forever, your fault, and yearning forgiveness. But the ultimate realization happens when he actually sounds the letters out phonetically. Wife.
But here's where the story completely subverts expectations. His wife, Melissa, is actually right there at Meadow Creek. She had driven him to the cemetery. She knew he was grieving this woman, even if she didn't know the full dark extent of his culpability in her death. She compassionately drives her husband to his deceased mistress's gravesite, and she waits in the car for him to mourn.
It's an incredible scene.
I have to push back here, though, because as a reader, you immediately think, why on earth would she do that? Where is the anger? Where is the confrontation?
This raises an important question, though, and it's a natural reaction to have. But it points to the messy reality of true compassion. Howard actively resists a neat, explosive Hollywood ending here. Melissa doesn't scream, she doesn't demand answers, she doesn't throw him out. She simply offers her hand and drives him to a church. Howard is portraying the agonizing reality of yearning for forgiveness and the incredibly heavy burden of making things right. He presents this complexity completely naturally, without judging the characters. Melissa's compassion isn't weakness. It is a monumental strength that forces the unnamed man to finally face his own brokenness. And that choice to accept grace in a fictional setting is the perfect bridge into the reality of Part 7, family legends, miracles, and finding God.
Here, Howard pulls back from the Gothic fiction to recount the true foundational legends of his own family, starting with the 7th illustrated work, Swimming Lessons.
I have to say, reading Swimming Lessons, this story requires such tender treatment. It is terrifying and beautiful all at once.
The details here recount a terrifying car accident from his family's history. Howard's Aunt Margie was driving her siblings down a road in a dense, blinding fog when they lost control and crashed into a strip pit.
The car was submerged and sinking fast in the freezing, murky water. Now, Margie was entirely a non-swimmer. She was deeply, paralyzingly terrified of the water.
Just absolutely terrified.
Yet, despite that absolute phobia, she bravely dives back into the strip pit to save her brothers Eddie and Everett and her sister Nancy.
It is an act of immense, selfless courage. Margie's love for her siblings completely overrode her deepest, most primal fear.
And Howard connects this physical salvation in the water to the spiritual promise found in the Bible verse Isaiah 43:2, which says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers they shall not overwhelm you." It's a literal manifestation of that promise.
But it's the aftermath of that near drowning that Howard connects to the deeper spiritual themes of his memoir. After surviving the strip pit, the siblings realized how fragile life was. So Meemaw's kids, Margie, Eddie, Everett, and Nancy, made a pact with their mother.
The One Ring Pact. Whenever they traveled, as soon as they arrived safely at their destination, they would call Meemaw. But they wouldn't answer. They would let the phone ring exactly one time and then hang up. That single ring was the signal. It meant, I am safe, I am alive.
Think about the elegance of that. A simple, invisible signal of safety transmitted across miles of wire. Now, bridge that pact to a promise Meemaw made to a young R.C. Howard years later. Before she passed away, she was talking to him about faith. And she made him a promise. She promised that when she made it to heaven, she would send him a sign so he would know without a doubt that God was real.
The emotional payoff of this detail gives me absolute chills. Meemaw passes away, the family is grieving, and the night after she passes, the phone rings at Aunt Margie's house.
It rings exactly one time.
One ring, the family's traditional signal for arriving safely. Meemaw used the One Ring Pact to fulfill her promise to Howard. It was her way of saying, I arrived safely, God is real. That single ring is the pivot point of the entire manuscript. Up until this point, we've been looking at how a child observes the world, how he creates meaning through pop culture, and how he processes trauma through fiction. But that single ring shifts the focus outward.
Yeah.
It introduces the ultimate thesis of our deep dive today. Howard believes that the universe, or God, is actively speaking back to him.
This isn't just nostalgia anymore. It's a divine tapestry. And Howard lays out a series of staggering, just coincidence discoveries that occurred in real time while he was writing and formatting this very book.
The coincidences are undeniably compelling, especially when you look at the architecture of the book itself. Let's look at the numbers. Howard did not plan the final page count in advance. But when the manuscript was finished, the numbered pages stopped at exactly 237.
For a man who dedicated a massive portion of this book to analyzing The Shining, landing organically on room 237, the most infamous haunted room in Kubrick's film, is chilling.
It really is.
And it's worth noting that in Stephen King's original novel, the room was 217. Kubrick changed it to 237. Howard's book aligns specifically with the cinematic language he grew up speaking.
But the math gets even more precise. When you add in the unnumbered pages, the intro, the index, the front matter, the total physical page count of the book comes out to exactly 250.
Wow.
This perfectly mathematically mirrors the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps, the exact day he chose to publish it to honor his father.
It's like the book itself was vibrating on a specific frequency.
Yeah.
And then there's the movie connection. At the end of the book, Howard includes a deeply vulnerable personal poem titled My First Time. Sometime later, he is obsessively rewatching the 1980 Gene Wilder comedy Stir Crazy, trying to nail down a specific quote for the book.
He lets the movie play, and there is a brief, almost throwaway shot. The camera zooms in on Gene Wilder's character's prison notebook. Written across the cover of the notebook in bold letters is the phrase, "My first time."
That is wild.
Decades before Howard wrote his poem, a movie he deeply loved had thrown the exact title onto the screen.
But the thread that hit me the hardest involves his father. There was a specific day when Howard finally handed his completed manuscript over to his illustrator. It's a day of massive emotional release, a culmination of years of wrestling with these memories.
Right.
On that exact day, his phone buzzes. It's a text from his dad. Now, keep in mind, his dad knows absolutely nothing about the content of this book.
Yeah.
He doesn't know the title. He doesn't know the themes. He doesn't know that Howard is explicitly writing about life lessons.
The father is completely in the dark, yet the text message simply contains a link to a movie with the message, "You should watch this." The title of the movie, The Ultimate Gift.
Okay, I have to stop us here. We have to address the elephant in the room. What does this all mean?
Well,
From a skeptical standpoint, you could argue this is just classic apophenia, the human brain's tendency to perceive meaningful patterns within random data. We are pattern-seeking machines. Are we looking at a cosmic high-five from the universe? Or just a guy who watched too many movies retrofitting meaning onto random events?
it's the essential debate between random chaos and Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that have no causal relationship but are deeply connected by meaning.
Right.
Howard wrestles with this skepticism himself. He notes that the dictionary coldly defines a coincidence as an accident with good timing, but he rejects that. He arrives at a beautifully profound theological definition of his own.
What is his conclusion?
Howard concludes that a coincidence is the moment God stays just far enough off stage to let you choose doubt, but close enough that your heart knows better.
Wow. Just far enough off stage.
It's not a burning bush. It's a whisper. God is revealing himself in the timing, in the hyper-specific language of 80s cinema, page numbers, and family packs that only Howard would possess the cipher to understand. It's a private conversation between the author and the divine.
Just far enough off stage to let you choose doubt, but close enough that your heart knows better? That completely recontextualizes everything we've talked about today.
It does.
The hyper-observation we discussed at the beginning, it wasn't just to see snow on a Martian apple. It was training his eyes to eventually see the hand of God in the margins of his own life. Which brings us perfectly to the final bookend of this journey.
Yes, Howard returns to the Little Prince for his closing thought. The second quote he uses is, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye."
The journey of the man-child is complete. It started with mourning the loss of childhood wonder, navigating the physical boundaries of the 80s, and escaping into fantasy. But it concludes with an adult finding God, understanding grace, and realizing that the most important things in the universe, faith, memory, love, and the radio frequency of the divine, are entirely invisible. You just have to trust the dial.
It is a stunning achievement in Memoir.
If you are listening to this right now, I cannot stress this enough.
Yeah.
You need to seek out R.C. Howard's work. Life Lessons of a Man-Child, a memoir, is an absolute treasure.
Absolutely.
In a world where we are constantly told to scroll faster, consume quicker, and let algorithms dictate our attention, taking the time to read a book like this, or taking the time to observe a piece of fruit, or create your own art, is a modern act of rebellion. Don't let your inner child get buried under the digital timeline. Reclaim your wonder. Pay attention to the details.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to ponder as you go about the rest of your day or week. If our lives are indeed manuscripts where God or the universe is quietly signing the margins in invisible ink, what hidden threads in your own life have you been casually dismissing as mere coincidences? What patterns are just waiting for you to finally stop, pay attention, and pull the thread?
Such a powerful question. Thank you all for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive. Until next time, keep observing, keep creating, and remember, the universe might just be leaving you an Easter egg right now. See you next time.